Hillsdale College has an unusually assigns, let's say unusually, a central role to both liberal education and citizenship. The statues on your campus attest to this. How do you see that relationship? I mean, from some people would say they're antithetical to each other. Liberal education is about universals and about transcendent things, or about old things. And on the other hand, politics is about here and now and our own, and that they pull you in two different directions. So why do you try to combine them, or how do you try to combine them?
There's this curious thing about the classical world. They wrote an awful lot about politics. Plato's Republic.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, there's politics is a liberal art. But in the modern time, I could show a relationship and a contrast that way. Modern politics are built on the idea of success, effectiveness. We can make the world the way we want to. We just have to organize everything to get that done. And that means that modern politics tends to reduce education to vocation, let's say, way to get a job, turn you into a worker, turn you into a producer. The committee in the House of Representatives that deals with education is the Education and the Workforce Committee, right? But that's because it tries to do everything that way.
Yes.
Now, the Declaration of Independence is not couched in those terms. Its view is that there are some ultimates beyond politics, and politics are to be fashioned according to those ultimates, and they're wrong if they're not. And so the study of those things that are beyond politics breeds, and that liberal education comes from the conception that there are some ends that are not tied to anything above them, and therefore they're free. They're the ultimates. They're liberal. They're good for their own sake. But that, of course, obviously connects to liberty, because the free man, the man at large, to devote himself to that life above while dealing with necessity, that man wouldn't be told what to do by an intrusive government.
One of your heroes and one of your statues, so to speak, Winston Churchill, of course, famously said a life has to be nailed either to the cross of thought or the cross of action. But you're intimating he was wrong about that.
He was... you have to understand what he meant. So either one is a sacrifice. Mm-hmm. They both have their claims, and they're both necessary. But this is the same man who also said, I'll complete a quote that I used earlier, a few days after the Iron Curtain speech, he went to the University of Miami before Donna Shalala was its president. And he gave a speech and he said...
why would he go?
Yeah, why would he go? He said, I hope that the returning servicemen will not study purely vocational subjects. And that's when he said, engines were made for men, not men for engines. Mm-hmm. And to have a broad, comprehending outlook on the human story with all its tragedies and all of its unquenchable hopes is necessary for a well-ordered soul. So, and Churchill himself, he didn't go to college, but he developed a want to go to college. Mm-hmm. And the reason why he didn't go, I believe, although he doesn't quite explicitly say that, is contained in a conversation he had with some people from Oxford that he reports in his book, My Early Life. And these people from Oxford were nihilist or relativist, and they were claiming that...
Fashionably intellectual.
Very much, yeah. And he says...
Bloomsbury types, huh?
Everything depends on your senses, right?
Uh-huh.
And the senses are unreliable. You can't prove. And he says, well, you both see the sun and feel its heat. And they say, senses. And he says, well, you could make an instrument that would measure it and confirm what you see and feel. And they say, senses. And he says, well, okay then. But I will just reply that the sun is very hot, and so is hell. And if you doubt it, you could visit. Well, in other words, the mission of the university cultivates a soul that is not to be used as a tool. In other words, a free soul. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, there's not much of understanding of that in politics in America today. It would be a mission of a university to point that out these days.
Or of a college.
A college, correct.
In some ways, colleges are friendlier to the liberal arts, more natural homes for the liberal arts than universities, I would say.
They have been adapted. I know some of this from you, Charles, but the universities have been adapted to the German model, right? And they are large, cooperating engineering projects. Right. Dewey says to contribute to the social evolution of the society. And of course, when you understand what that means, that's just an exercise in power, not in discovery, not in the activity of thinking about the best things, which is, by the classic account, you know, I mean, in Aristotle you get two things, right? You get the account that the authoritative human community, the one that addresses itself to the highest human good, is the political community. And then on the other hand, he describes, especially in the ethics, a different kind of community that is also called the highest of all, and that is contemplative friendship. And so if you put those two things together, you get an idea of a politics that is the guardian of that kind of friendship, and that benefits everyone because it allows all other forms of good human association.
Now, speaking of thinking about excellent things, you have a new book called The Founder's Key, The Divine and Natural Connection Between the Declaration and the Constitution, and What We Risk by Losing It. In the book, you argue that this sort of Aristotelian understanding of human excellence, or Churchillian understanding, one might even say, was very prominent in the thoughts of the founders of this country, and emblematically expressed in the Declaration of Independence. What do you mean by that? Tell me about the truths in the Declaration of Independence.
Well, you can't understand the Declaration of Independence, in my opinion, until you understand that it's an act of obedience. It begins with that. It says there are these laws. We didn't make them. They're written in nature. They are actually the first law that's the first right that's named in the Declaration of Independence is a collective right, a right of a people, and a people is entitled under these laws to a certain station. But then you soon learn in the Declaration that there's a bunch of things that they are required too. And those are listed mainly negatively, but not exclusively, in the charges against the king. Because there are certain ways you have to comport yourself. And you're a barbarian if you don't comport yourself that way. So it's a document about the high aims of human beings and the freedom that's necessary to the pursuit of those aims.
And I mean, no one, even in contemporary American politics, would exactly disavow the Declaration of Independence. I mean, President Obama writes about it frequently, invokes it in his speeches. But something has changed in the interpretation of the Declaration. Something that you go to the heart of, I think, in your book. Why is it? What's happened to truth? The president, for example, in his second book, The Audacity of Hope, says that if there's one thing that united the founders, it was their rejection of absolute truth. You seem to have a different interpretation.
Well, it's inconvenient to read the Declaration of Independence if you hold the view of Barack Obama, because it says the opposite, right? It begins with this proclamation of these great truths. We hold these truths to be self-evident, but before that, some grounding in the laws of nature and nature's God. Think of Hamilton's famous thing, the rights of man are written as with a sunbeam in the whole volume of human nature by the hand of divinity itself. So what's happened to truth is it's become what we make of it. It's tied in Obama. You know Obama much better than I do, and you've been more right about him than I have been, I'm so grieved to say.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
It hurts my feelings that I took him less seriously than you did at the beginning, and it's a bitter fact that you were correct. But in the antecedents of Obama, the birth of his argument, which you've written a lot about and others have, the point is, truth is contingent now upon time and circumstances, and our perception of it is governed by where we stand and the things that happen around us. And because that's true, it introduces an element of grasping to get control of the world. There's all these forces working upon us. We should dominate them. But to dominate them, we're going to have a lot of government.
Right. Yes, there's no repose. I mean, this is one of the things that Coolidge emphasizes in his speech on the spirit of the Declaration. I mean, that these truths are final. Not all truths are final, but these truths, these self-evident truths, are final. And there's no progressing beyond them. There's only, as he says, going backwards, shunning them and retreating to an age of darkness, however scientific its boasts may be, which is also, of course, a Churchillian theme from World War II.
Mm-hmm. That's it. You can't, if the British Empire should live 1,000 years, men will say this is their finest hour. In other words, what we're going to do here is a peak of human excellence because it vindicates the highest human excellences and disdains the barbarism of Hitler. And that can never be surpassed. You can't do better than that as a human being, because this is what a human being is. And you have to understand the Declaration is a fantastic achievement, because there were writs out for the arrest, and the writs were in the hands of a general with an army, not police, looking for these guys. And the emphasis and finality with which they state their opinion so strong that it amounts to an appeal to the king at the end and the British people. Look at the right of this thing. Mm-hmm. It's more important than your power. You cannot defy it. That's a very remarkable achievement.